Good morning. Good morning to our audience here in the room with us, and good morning to our audience that's joining us online. Thank you so much for being here today for what's going to be an excellent panel about the Baltic Sea, its security, and the nations around, and how we can impact this together, drawing on the theme of this morning's opening conversation, that divided we fall. My name is Cordelia Buchanan Ponczek. I'm a researcher at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, but I'm originally from the United States, and I've lived in Europe for the past 10 years. I'm joined by a really fantastic panel, and I'm going to introduce our panelists, starting directly to my left. I have Carl-Oskar Bohlin, the Minister of Civil Defense of Sweden, the first one in Sweden since World War II. After the minister, I'm joined by Dr. Justina Budginaite-Froehly, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, but with a background from the Ministry of Defense of Lithuania. Following Justina, I'm joined by Anton Hofreiter, a member of the Bundestag from Germany. Then I'm joined from Poland by Vice-Admiral Krzysztof Jaworski, commander of the Maritime Operations of Poland. And finally, Mr. Gustav Lindström, the Director General, of the Council of Baltic Sea States, an intergovernmental organization that's focused on the Baltic Sea and cooperation. Now, there's a lot that I could say about the Baltic Sea, but I think we should turn to our speakers to hear what they have to say. And I'm going to start this out with an open question to all of you, starting with the Minister. How do you see the security situation of the Baltic Sea today?
Thank you so much, and thank you for your attendance here today. It's of course a broad question, but the Baltic Sea, the situation on the Baltic Sea, is of course reflecting the dire security situation that Europe is finding itself in, and I think that we need to take more measures to protect, for example, critical infrastructure. I think we will get into that and sort of present our adversary with the chain without weak links. Thank you.
Justina, what do you have to add to that?
Thank you so much. So I think there are two parts in this equation when we want to address the situation and the security situation in the Baltic Sea region. So the one part is what the aggressor, Russia, is doing, and all of us know about that. So we know about sabotage against our critical infrastructure. We know about the GPS jamming and spoofing. We know about drones, so no need to mention all of that. But the other part of the equation is how our stance to it is, the Western, the European stance. And I'm a little bit afraid and concerned that we are kind of now dragged into a very much reactive posture. It's very nice that when NATO reacts, when NATO has new missions there, Baltic Sentry, Eastern Sentry, and so on. But I think that the dynamics itself on a strategic level is not maybe that good, actually. So when you are asking me what the situation is, I think the security situation is bad, and maybe even worse, that we are ready to openly admit. And it's because of these two things, because of what the aggressor is doing, and because of our maybe not really steadfast readiness to kind of take over the initiative.
It's really interesting, the sort of the reactive posturing, and then this note that it's sort of a bad security situation, and I can imagine that maybe it feels like we're not doing enough in the lead up. But Mr. Hofreiter, I'm very curious to hear your perspective on the situation in the Baltic Sea.
I think what I already said is the situation in the Baltic Sea reflects the overall very dangerous situation we have in Europe. And I think the main problem is that the Russian leaders, that Putin itself don't fear anymore in any kind Europe. He thinks we are weak, and he thinks he can do what he wants. And I think that we have to change by that we act from ourselves. Or when you look especially to the Baltic Sea, I think the Shadow Fleet is a special threat. The Shadow Fleet in many aspects, because with the many ships of the Shadow Fleet, they destroy critical infrastructure. With the Shadow Fleet, they have a lot of ships which can do espionage, where drones can be started. Then they already earn a lot of money with it. And it's also a really big danger for the environment, for the fragile environment of the Baltic Sea. So I think we should act much harsher on the Shadow Fleet because it's beside from Russia, it's now all NATO sea, and I think with environmental issues we can act much harsher on the Shadow Fleet, because the Shadow Fleet is not requiring too many laws when it comes to environment in the Baltic Sea. Maybe if we would act much harsher, also some other ships would get problem because they also not fulfill all requirements, but I'm sure that nearly all ships of the Shadow Fleet don't fulfill it. So we should act proactive and put down the Shadow Fleet totally in line with the laws, but I think we could do it if we want to do it.
Very interesting. From Justina, we heard maybe to be reactive, and then from here, from you, I hear we need to act. We need to take these concrete steps. But Vice-Admiral Jaworski, I'm curious to your insights, especially from the military perspective.
Exactly. Maybe I start that you have to remember that Baltic Sea is very important. It's a strategic hotspot, critical for trade and also for energy. We have really important for us as a Baltic countries lines of communication and also critical underwater structure. But as you said, from military point of view, I would say that on the Baltic Sea we have hybrid war now. It's typical, like definition. We have several factors which are, and of course we are experiencing some even sabotage, as we know. So far we had something like 11, as far as I remember, attacks on critical underwater infrastructure. We have information warfare. We have also cyber, so we experience in cyber domain as well. And what is important, like it was mentioned, Shadow Fleet also. It's really obstacle for our trade, and GPS and some spoofing, so jamming, which can influence our naval asset, not only naval, but assets which are at sea.
I think you've given us a really nice outline of the hybrid threats, and I hope that we're going to pick up on that very shortly. But Mr. Lindström, I mean, from the intergovernmental perspective, how are you seeing the situation of the Baltic Sea right now?
Thank you, Cordelia. And maybe just 2 points. The first one, just to reinforce what all colleagues have said here, which is that the Baltic Sea region has become a chessboard for hybrid operations. And this will continue for quite some time. So for us, it is very critical to understand who is behind these and how are the tactics changing over time. So that is the first point. The second point is to remember that in the Baltic Sea region, it is not just the hybrid operations and potential threats. We have to recall that we have all the remaining challenges that always have been there. Just to give one example, is we have tons of unexploded munitions in the bottom of the Baltic Sea, including chemical munitions. And these are now starting to shed, so some of these elements are coming into the water. So traditional challenges still there. We need to work together across the countries in the Baltic Sea region to address this, but also we need to look forward. And that is really the more concerning thing, because as we look ahead in the Baltic Sea region, we have countries who are very adept at digitizing, having a society based on smart cities, smart energy. And moving forward, we need to be on the lookout for challenges, and potential attacks on cashless societies. What do you do if those systems of payment, digital payments go down? If you have issues with drones now flying over airports. So we also have to continually look forward and try to preemptively understand what are some of the risks that we might face in the region. Thank you.
I really appreciate how you bring in both the old and the new by touching on, as you mentioned, these things on the seabed and how these are pre-existing problems. They haven't gone away, and we need to keep them in mind still. But then also introducing these digital issues, and this is looking to the future. So it feels like we have maybe a three-part system. We have the old, and then a bit of what the Vice-Admiral described and what Mr. Hofreiter described, and then the new going forward. So maybe I'll turn back to the Minister and hear a bit of the Swedish perspective on maybe some of the concrete things, the effects that you have seen from the Swedish perspective on critical infrastructure, but then also how Sweden is looking at hybrid threats and treating that within the country and then within the Baltic Sea region as a whole.
So let me just start off by saying that, and I think that reflects what also has been said here. We're dealing with an adversary that will take every opportunity and try to grab everything that sits loose. So we must not make the mistake to all the time just sort of trying to game the past and then prepare for what has already happened, but also take measures that makes us more prudent to handle things that has not yet occurred. So we must always have this perspective that we have an adversary that will try to exploit new weaknesses that has not yet submerged or occurred to us. So what we're trying to do right now is present a new posture where we are constraining Russia. I think what was being said with the activities with regards to the shadow fleet was very important. I think there needs to be a more forward-leaning discussion when it comes to making use of the frozen assets, for example, to use as reparation, and also show Russia that we are serious when it comes to constraining their activities. With all this being said, we can also look at what we've done since the last year within the Baltic Sea when it comes to protection of critical infrastructure, because I think this also generally strengthens our posture. So what we've done in Sweden is that we're trying to coordinate all relevant agencies in a more coherent way than before. So first and foremost, of course, the Royal Swedish Navy and the Swedish Coast Guard, which in Sweden is a civil agency, to get better sea surveillance, to be able to detect what is going on in the maritime domain. And then one more thing that I think is crucially important, not only alongside Swedish agencies, but alongside all the countries surrounding the Baltic Sea, is that we get the ability to treat different type of infrastructures more coherent. So, for example, if a power cable breaks undersea, the authorities will know it straight away, and you will have the ability to take countermeasures. If a fiber optic cable breaks undersea, that is usually run by a private contractor, which not by necessity notifies the relevant agencies. Then could they then take a countermeasure? So we must, across the board, have a better cooperation between private actors in this field and between agencies across the nation surrounding the Baltic states. And I think that a lot of this is already being done, but I think it could be more, we could put even more efforts into that. Thank you.
It's really interesting what you say about sort of time being of the essence. I know from the Finnish perspective, there's the sense of time being of the essence when dealing with some of the ships that have caused damages, and that also maybe one of the ideas of the Baltic Century is to have eyes on the space so that a quick reaction can come forward. But it's very interesting what you raised about the private companies and this lack of necessity in terms of the notification system, and then trying to take that forward. But then, Justina, you've done a lot of work on sort of the defense networks and modalities. And so thinking about critical infrastructure and connectivity, how do you see that impacting the sort of defense space? Does it have any impact?
I think definitely it has an impact, and we see very clearly what is being done against that in the hands of NATO. I think this is one thing that has to be mentioned. So after this massive amount of attacks happened in the Baltic Sea, 11 cables have been cut and counting. So the Baltic Sentry mission, for example, was initiated. And what's important, I think, that it was paired with another initiative, which is called Task Force X Baltic, with the aim to quickly apply new technological solutions, unmanned systems to the protection of critical energy infrastructure. And this is exactly the thing going into this networked approach of security and going on what just the colleague said, that we have to break those siloed processes. We have to have networked approaches to cooperation, but also to technology, right? And these are many important lessons that can be learned from Ukraine, for example, because this country actually, without a fleet, if you take Maritime, was able, with its mosquito fleet, so to say, of drones, was able to destroy like 75% or so of the Russian Black Sea fleet. And just by doing exactly that, by employing agile systems that are modifiable on high speed and having these quick feedback loops with the battlefield, right, and with the operators and with the innovators. So I think we are definitely, on a broader perspective, moving in everything networked when it comes to our processes and when it comes to our technology.
I feel like drones are on everybody's mind nowadays, so it's good that you've brought that up. Mr. Hofreiter, I'm thinking of sort of your perspective from Germany, as well as having worked on transportation before, and how you see this connectivity issue within the Baltic Sea, both for Germany, but then for the wider area.
I think that we have to aware that our enemy, Russia, is learning a lot in the war with Ukraine. And you already mentioned the Black Sea. They have learned to deal not so good as Ukraine, but they are learning a lot. And so they could be able to break our connectivity much faster than we think. And I think especially the threat from drones, may it be maritime drones or drones in the air, is much, much higher than we so far realize. When the last time I was in Ukraine, it's 4 or 3 weeks ago, there the soldiers explained me the innovation cycle for drones is, also for the software of drones, is 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks is innovation cycle. When I look to Germany, we have speeded up our procurement processes, but it still takes, when it's fast, 2 years. So you compare 4 weeks with 2 years. Maybe the Russians are not as good as the Ukrainians, or for sure they are not as good as the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians are defend with much less material and people so far the line. But they have learned a lot. And I think that we have to realize that our enemy is learning every day, and that we, compared to this, are much too slow. And the Baltic Sea is so important. And because of this, in the beginning, as said, we have to act much more active, that Russia is not sure anymore that we are weak and cautious. Because as long as they think we are weak and cautious, they will continue to attack. And if you're the one who attacks, you're always in advantage compared to the one who defends. So I think we have to do a lot against the shadow fleet. We also, I think we need at least the capability for cyber attacks on Russia ourselves. I don't want to attack Russia ourselves. But they have to know that if they continue this way, we are able also to attack. But so far we are not able. The only one in the West who is able to do really good cyber attacks is the US. And we don't know where the US is heading. So I'm very, very in favor that we start much more to act and not only wait in defense and defend. I'm sorry for my English.
No, please. Your points are very well taken. And also, it seems to me, when we're talking about connectivity in the Baltic Sea, that you've extended this out a bit to Ukraine and really taking lessons learned from Ukraine, what we can gain from them and how we address the Baltic Sea area. But Vice-Admiral, I wanted to turn to you with a bit of a similar perspective as Dr. Budginaite-Froehly. The military side of this, in terms of connectivity, are we seeing an impact either when it comes to the protection or an impact on military infrastructure itself or the way that you operate?
The current situation, security situation, of course, has strong impact on our, for instance, infrastructure. And from Polish point of view, actually, it doesn't only about Polish, but we have to protect our critical infrastructure. Like in Poland, we have LNG terminals and some cables, and it's very important for every country. But someone mentioned about private companies, and they are responsible for infrastructure. And in our case, I think that not only it refers to Poland, but we have to think about some changes in legal issues, because private companies should be responsible for protection, and they have no forces to do that, no capabilities. So that's the reason that we, as a Navy and the military agencies, we have to protect it. It has impact on also for our Navy and for our organization. So it's important to think about how to provide security for this infrastructure from companies. And I think that also nowadays we have to strengthen our civil military cooperation among agencies, among companies, as I mentioned, and also some administration, for instance. And we do that in Poland. We protect and we cooperate. And I think that also very, very important is international cooperation between our countries. All this, for instance, cables, there's a cable between Sweden and Poland, so it refers not only to Poland but also to Sweden. So we need also to cooperate together. So I think that's the point.
Just a brief follow-up, because I'm aware that Poland is undertaking quite a large overhaul of its port infrastructure and of its rail infrastructure. And so when we talk about this whole of society approach, do you think that part of that new project is going to be taking into account this military side, the risks to that infrastructure, and keeping Poland safe and secure?
Yeah, definitely, yes.
And Mr. Lindström, from the intergovernmental perspective, I mean, we've touched on a lot of military themes and political themes, but your organization is very well placed to think precisely about the connectivity and the means to go about, the legal issues, issues of cooperation, some of the classic issues that you've raised. So have you seen these discussions of infrastructure, this critical connectivity, raised within your organization and among the member countries?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's a member state organization and also with the European Union, it is a very good platform to have discussions on who is facing what, and if there are any common approaches or common political approaches to these issues. But maybe to complement what has been said before regarding critical infrastructure protection, hopefully there's not an emphasis just on one type of infrastructure. We tend to talk of critical infrastructures as maybe gas, oil, electricity, sewage, water, but there are the services too. And we need to think of the critical infrastructures that are critical services, and that would be everything from the banking to having access to healthcare. And in that respect, maybe just to remind everybody that we are facing on a daily basis at the municipal level, attacks on hospitals that have very limited capability to withstand some of these attacks. They're seeing their data frozen or blocked. So when we think of critical infrastructures, we need to have a very holistic view of this. And there are many sectors today that are very vulnerable. And we need to remember those because sometimes going for the low-hanging fruit can give a lot of benefits. And maybe the final point is also a reminder that when we talk about these critical infrastructures, the costs and repair times vary. So we think of these cables under the water in the Baltic Sea region. But for example, there was a very interesting report by the RAND Corporation that came out this year where they have done, with some methodology, they have calculated the average costs of repairing and also the costs of having a break in these systems. And to give you some examples, an electricity interconnector, they calculated an average cost per day of 12 million euros when it's broken. But if you look at a oil pipeline, that cost went up to 36 million euros per day on average. And the worst is gas pipelines. Here you're talking about 75 million euros per day. Also the repair times. An electricity interconnector maybe will take 20 to 40 days to repair. But if we're talking about pipelines, we're talking 5 to 9 months. So costs when it's an electricity cable are in the millions, but when we talk about oil and gas, we're talking in the billions. So the devil's in the details. That's maybe my point. And let's not forget both the services, but also the hard infrastructures. Thank you.
Those very large numbers sound more than just details. They sound quite important. And it's also interesting because earlier we touched on the theme of time when it came to responsiveness, but then you're also reminding us of the element of time when it comes to the damage that's been done. And so what I hear, this proactive approach also helps to save money because then we don't have elements coming offline and then we're not leaving different populations vulnerable. So I wanted to ask a bit of a two-part question and to get all of your perspective, because it seems like we can all agree on some of these broad brushstrokes of the security situation and the different challenges it poses. But I'd like to hear some concrete examples of steps that are being taken, that have been taken, especially with respect to building resilience. And this time I'd actually like to go in the reverse order and perhaps start with you, Mr. Lindström, and think, from your perspective, some of the steps that you've seen taken, and especially speaking to that resilience element.
So thank you. Resilience, of course, is a very big term. We tend to think of resilience happening at different levels of government, but also at the local level. It's very critical that local authorities have the capacity to bounce back or to be able to withstand. And across our member states, I mean, we have formats in which the member states can discuss how they're doing resilience, how to share good practice, how to talk about lessons identified. But we have also seen that different member states will test different things. For example, one of our member states, Estonia, very much is looking into the issue of evacuation strategies. So they had a very large exercise which involved about 37,000 individuals, testing to see, the resilience. Sometimes you need to do evacuation. So they're very keen on trying to develop guidelines for this, and now this is extending to the other Baltic states, and over time it will go also to the other members of the organization. Because of some of the dialogue between the member states, they have realized that they can share good practices when it comes to shelters in buildings that are already built. For example, in Sweden, many buildings have shelters already in them, and maybe some of you here know that countries like Switzerland also have a lot of shelters. This is something where you see those ideas and concepts move to other countries where they see, how did you do this? How do you set up these shelters in existing buildings? What are the key ingredients that you need? So resilience is a lot about that. But we have also found that communications, so communicating in times of crises, and the CBSS now, through its civil protection network, is developing crisis communications to enhance resilience. And what we have found is that a weak spot was communicating to individuals with certain handicaps. It could be people who are blind, who are deaf, and then it can also be another category of individuals who don't speak specific languages. So when you do these things and you compare across countries, good practices, it is very helpful to build bottom-up resilience. Now, resilience comes top-down and bottom-up. They have to meet somewhere, and I'm sure we'll hear from others about different initiatives like the 72-hour capacity to bounce back. Thank you.
That's really interesting, and I appreciate that you bring in especially the people like the blind or the deaf that might face these struggles, and I'm really glad that your organization is doing work to help spread practices throughout the member countries. But moving from the intergovernmental to the military, Vice-Admiral, on steps taken and then resilience building.
Maybe I will show the Polish example, how to build resilience and also how to mitigate all the threats. So starting for, I would say, diversification of supplying of goods and fuel. Like in our case, we cut our trade with Russia at all. 100% it's done. I mean that now we provide our fuel, for instance, from US or from Qatar, from some other countries. And for instance, we built LNG terminal in Świnoujście just to be independent regarding providing gas for Poland. And now we are building also some FSRU, so floating terminal in Gdańsk, and we will be fully independent regarding gas. And some others like wind farms on the Baltic Sea. But what steps can be taken to protect and to mitigate? I think that we have to, I would divide into two parts. NATO perspective, like you know that we have operation, or actually it's extended vigilance activity, Baltic Sentry. And every day on the Baltic Sea, there are some NATO ship, including Polish ship, because we belong, of course, to that initiative, and we protect and deter our critical infrastructure in specific regions across the whole Baltic Sea. And from our Polish perspective, from our national side, we call Operation Zatoka. It's operation run by the Navy and the Border Guard, and also we protect from our from using Polish assets to do that. So that, I would say, two initiatives, Baltic Center and also Operation Zatoka. And last but not least, I would say that you should, actually it's happening, sanctions are very important, and they can, of course, build up resilience for the longer time to protect our infrastructure and to provide for citizens energy.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hofreiter, so steps taken and then resilience building from your perspective.
I think some steps the Europeans has taken, which were very important, was by Sweden and Finland. Sweden and Finland now are a member of NATO, so the Baltic Sea is beside Russia a NATO sea. I think that leveled up the resilience a lot. Then, as far as I know, we are working much more together. I also see within the national parliaments that we are working much closer together. Also in Germany, the discussion has changed totally. When you look, Germany was very naive. And the 24th of February, when Russia the second time attacked Ukraine, we imported 55 of our natural gas from Russia, which was really a kind of stupidity and naivety. And now we don't import or nearly don't import Russian gas. On LNG. There is still some problem, but I think where we had to get better when it comes to resilience is to look for future problems. For example, when it comes to wind turbines, and as a Green, I'm really in favor of wind turbines, but because they are slightly cheaper, we import as Europe many from China. And that's a big risk, because these Chinese wind turbines can be used by China to make blackouts within Europe. in the end, you don't, when it comes to the price of the electricity, you have 0.00001 difference between when you use Chinese wind turbines or European wind turbines. But for the private companies, of course it's a difference because they're slightly cheaper. But why do we allow it? I would be in favor that we say it's too risky, we don't allow any Chinese wind turbines, but at least we should forbid the Chinese companies that the Chinese wind turbines can be used to make a blackout within Europe, because it's an imminent threat. We know China is one of the most potent ally of Russia, and when you look to the drones which Russia is attacking, they are full of Chinese material. So we don't know the moment when China will use their wind turbines to make a heavy blackout with Europe. So I think we have to prepare much more and to look much more in detail in what parts are used within our critical infrastructure. And I would be very in favor for critical infrastructure, and I say electricity is a part of a critical infrastructure, that it should be completely China-free.
I think one of the difficult things that Europe faces, because you mentioned both the gas and the wind turbines, that as Europe is moving to meet its electricity demands, on the one side as it wishes to wean off Russian gas, which is U.S. is putting a lot of pressure right now on that. I mean, there are challenges there, but then if we move towards something like wind turbines, as you've just introduced, there are challenges there. So it seems that there are challenges everywhere, and that foresight is very necessary. But Dr. Budginaite-Froehly, maybe I wanted to draw a bit on your Lithuanian perspective, as well as your transatlantic perspective, as you answer the question about sort of the resilience and the steps taken so far.
So on resilience in general, I think it's a huge achievement that we are talking about that. This wasn't a topic like 2-3 years ago. This was something very blurry, very soft, something which was not cool to talk about. So now it's necessary to talk about. And I would say this is like really a term in the making at the moment. As you know, at the Hague NATO summit in this June, there was an agreement where the member states pledged to increase their defense spending to 5% and 3% on hardcore defense spending, so to say, and 1.5% also being termed like resilience spending. So this is a huge opportunity, I think, for all the countries, including Lithuania and all other littoral countries of the Baltic region. Again, I think a little bit of an agreement of what we mean with this resilience is important, just to align with our broader strategy as NATO. So that's kind of steps forward, so to say. And on maybe broader terms, I think also resilience, when we think of that, there are two parts of that. I think one thing is how we react again. So also the EU is making some steps to kind of put some repair teams so that we can repair our damages very quickly, to have spare parts, you know, so that we kind of do not face those simple problems of not being able to have spare parts when we already have to fix something. So this is this one part, and I would say the easier part of resilience. You just have to prepare beforehand, so before the crisis happens, and then react quickly. But the other part is the rather proactive one. What can we do to prevent attacks from happening? And this is the hard part, of course, because we do not know what to expect. We do not know what the next attack of Russia will be. But if we take the critical energy infrastructure, I think that there are indeed huge potential in defense innovation, which could kind of be moved towards critical infrastructure protection, that there are maybe some solutions with protective mechanisms already built into the new energy infrastructure, like sensors and so, which could also then kind of have very good effects on the military area as well. Like if we have just, passive sensors, just kind of checking what's happening, just increasing our situational awareness. So this will be kind of a proactive approach in increasing our resilience. I would stop here.
Very interesting. I appreciate the discussion on resilience. I'm going to turn to the minister to have the final word on this. But after the minister's done, we're going to open the floor to questions. So now is a good time to sort of dig into your brain. But let's give the minister, I guess, our full attention first. Since Sweden, like Finland, is really renowned for its whole of a society approach to something like resilience. So I'm very eager to hear what the minister has to say about the steps that Sweden is taking to address that.
Thank you. So first, a few words of the Swedish definition of civil defense. We define civil defense as every activity that is necessary to conduct to prepare Sweden to handle the consequences of an armed attack. So civil defense is not only civil protection, it is every critical societal function, building robustness and resilience into that. So in Sweden, we have a system with 12 preparedness sectors encompassing, for example, telecommunications, which is one of the sectors that we have touched upon briefly. So we're building in more robustness into that. We are right now putting forward an investment program for security of supply, stockpiling, for example, but also working closer with private the private enterprise to ensure that Sweden can keep functioning also during wartime. So basically what we're doing right now in Sweden is that we are putting our money where our mouth is. So we have, within the coming years, we're increasing the expenditures for civil defense by a factor of 7. And alongside with that, we're moving on the trajectory towards 3.5% for military defense. And why are we doing this then on the civil defense? Because it is all about making the collective deterrence credible, because that is what civil defense is all about. And I think that is also what the Ukrainian example has shown us. The difference between Ukraine 2014 and Ukraine 2022 is that Ukraine 2022 managed to muster the support from the entirety of society to fight down the Russian aggression. Vladimir Putin made the assumption, alongside with many Europeans who thought it would go the same way, that this would be a swift victory for Russia in a week or so. But what he did not manage to factor in was the will to defend, but also that Ukraine had turned will into capability by building a robust and resilient society. And I think this is the important lesson for Europe right now, that if we're not only going to talk the talk, but also walk the walk to present a credible deterrence, we have to also invest in things that is building resilience and security into our society. For example, the cyber domain that was touched upon briefly here, that is of course a domain where the antagonist or the aggressor can reach directly into the civil part of all our society, and a sector where we need to invest heavily to mitigate the consequences and fend off the antagonist. And this goes for all the 12 sectors in Sweden. So we're putting forward substantial investment to make our deterrence credible, but also because this is intimately interlinked with the will to defend. So if you want to maintain the will to defend in your country, you must ensure that basic societal functionalities can keep functioning. And that is the kind of stamina that Ukraine has shown us, but that is also a consequence of the fact that Ukraine has managed to maintain these basic societal function even during a war of aggression directed towards them. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are very strong words. The will to defend. I will take that away from this panel with me for sure. Yes.
Cordelia, just a two-finger, because again, we also need to look ahead. And so just to say this initiative that I mentioned of 72 hours, just to explain what it is a desire to have members of society be able to fend for themselves for up to 72 hours. That means having enough cash, having enough water, having the basics in your home to be able to do this, and that builds resilience. And the final very quick point is that looking ahead, we're very vulnerable when it comes to our assets in space. This is not the time to discuss that, but we are heavily reliant on the positioning, navigational, and timing services of our satellites in space. And an opponent that would like to really affect our resilience would be somebody that goes after those assets. And if you look into it, a lot of these space assets are on low Earth orbit. They're accessible. And if you can target one, the debris from one might affect the other. It's called the Kessler syndrome. So looking forward, we are actually going to have to care a lot more about this. Thank you.
Minister, it looked like you had something to add very quickly, so we can turn over to the
I'm sorry, I
audience.
just have to reply because I think it's a very good initiative, but I think that we should raise the bar. Everyone in this room could survive for 72 hours sitting on their chair, not eating anything, not drinking anything. In Sweden, we demand a week. We're putting forward a demand on every agency, on every public agency, that they should have the means to fend for themselves for 2 weeks, meaning provide electricity, food, etc., for everyone they are responsible for, because we need to sort of step up the game and understand that why are we doing this? Why are we putting these demands on our populations? Because the idea put in the front of an existential threat is the fact that you should be able to make a contribution, not become a liability to society. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both your points. They're well taken. So I'm going to turn to the floor for questions. I'm going to take a batch of 3, and I'm going to try to do 2 batches of 3. We've got about just 12, 13 minutes left. So identify yourself, identify to whom you are addressing the question, ensure that it's a question, and make it succinct. I have a gentleman here to begin with.
Thank you very much to the panel. Julian Pavlak, I'm a researcher with the German Armed Forces. And my question is about decisiveness. I think we all agree about more measurements for resilience, for cooperation, but often it seems we or our political decision makers are often self-deterred by the effects of their potential effects of their actions. So, meaning from shooting down drones, from boarding potential vessels. We had the example in Estonia a couple of weeks ago where they tried to board a Shadow Fleet tanker, but didn't do. And this leads Russia to continue its activities in the region. So how do we change that to eventually walk the walk, as the minister said, to really do take action so Russia would not continue this approach?
So the money where the mouth is and the decisiveness. Then there's a gentleman just there in the center.
Hi, thank you. My name is Aaron. I'm from Sweden. I'm second lieutenant in the armed forces. And my question is directed to the entire panel. So when talking about preparedness, it's easy to get stuck on discussing stockpiles and bunkers for the civilian population. But the mental preparedness is also a very important aspect that is very easily left behind. So just a couple of days ago, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov mentioned he suggested that Russia is at war with NATO and the EU over Ukraine, which says something about their mental preparedness. But I would like to ask about ours. Are people prepared that there might be a war on our continent? Thank you.
Excellent. So the first, the panel about money where the mouth is, the second on mental preparedness, and then I'll take a third from the gentleman in the second row there.
Thank you very much. Konstantin Eget, DW Deutsche Welle correspondent in Lithuania. My question is very brief, and both to Minister Bohlin and to Herr Hofreiter. Should Russian planes, not Russian drones, but Russian military planes, be shot down without warning in NATO airspace? Thank you very much.
That is a zinger. So I will start with the minister, please.
So if I start from with the last question, so as the Minister of Defense in Sweden said, I think it was yesterday, there is already a protocol for this within the Swedish Defense Forces. They have the mandate to do so if it would be necessary given the circumstances. So it's very hard to give a general answer to this because there is a protocol for this and they have the mandate to do so if necessary, and if it would be necessary, then it would happen. And I think the other question was along the same lines. And when it comes to the mental preparedness, I couldn't agree more, because I think this is tremendously important. And I think the first step to mental preparedness is mental awareness of where we are. And that is why we're trying to address these issues starkly, with sincerity, with honesty of how we see the situation, and the situation is dire. The Swedish government is describing this as the most severe security situation since the end of the Second World War, basically, because the situation is so unpredictable, and it has room for escalatory movements that might happen quickly in ways that we are not anticipating. And that is why we're sending out a brochure to the entirety of the population, for example. And of course, part of it is that you should do the checklist and have your physical preparedness, but what that also hopefully gives you is your mental preparedness of what is the times and the circumstances that we are living under. We have entered into a new paradigm. The world of yesterday is not coming back anytime soon.
Yes, I think Prime Minister Tusk was saying in his opening comments, we always say before the war and after the war. Now, Justina.
I would maybe comment on the mental preparedness question, and I think it really depends on where in Europe you are. The closer to Russia and to the front line, the more prepared you are. And we can just say Finland, Sweden, the Baltic countries, Poland, these are the ones who I think are very much aware of what's happening, and very, like, really up to the local populations of people knowing what to do. And this, of course, is an answer to governmental policies of sending brochures, of asking for these 72 hours at the moment unassisted kind of living and surviving. So this is all of that which helps in that regard.
I think the main problem, as maybe not for Poland and the Baltics or Finland and Sweden, but already in Germany and the rest of Europe, is the population and the political elite prepared that at least Russia sees itself in war with Europe, and at least we already have a hybrid war. And there is the big problem. As you already said, closer to Ukraine, closer to Russia, the people realize it. In Germany, it's still, some people realize it, many don't. So I think we have here to do more, and I also would say our government has to do more to explain to people how dangerous the situation is, but not to make the people fear, but to explain we are prepared. To your question, I think the problem here is that we do so many things not we could do. We don't confiscate, for example, the frozen assets. We don't have sanction on all areas. For example, on nuclear, there is not any kind of sanctions against Russia. Rosatom is still totally connected with whole of Europe, and so you can name a lot of things. And so Russia, I think, is doing this, I already said it, because it believes we are weak. We are weaklings, and so he will provocate. And when you look to Turkey, it took 17 seconds when the Russian fighter plane entered Turkey airspace, and then they shot it down. And then nothing happened from the Russian side. I think we have to consider this, but I'm not a military person, so I will let it to the militaries. But I would say we should do much, much more. As I said, Russia has to fear us and not to think we are weak.
So we're going to turn it over to the military and then to the intergovernmental perspective. Mindful of time, I will regrettably ask you to keep your comments somewhat short.
Of course, I like the expression the will to defend. So if there is a will to defend, in that case we took advantage of this and give strong answer if any threat appears. And regarding to the question from military point of view, yes, if someone is threatening, we should defend. But actually it depends on politicians if we can do that, because we have to be consistent with the law.
I think a lot has been said, so let's defer to more questions.
So regrettably, we only have 2 minutes left, which means I don't think that we're going to have enough time for questions, but I would urge everybody to take your questions to the panel out in the hallway. I would perhaps ask for just a rapid fire 1 minute, that I guess each of you, this takeaway from the panel, and a summary, 1 sentence of the way that you see forward. We've heard the will to defend, so I will again perhaps begin with Mr. Lindström and then work our way back to the minister.
Simply to say that, as you could see in the panel here, it takes a lot of different, you can have a lot of different backgrounds, and it's just reflective of the approach that we need to take going forward. We need to really share thinking, but work collaboratively on this. And but things are likely to continue to be challenging for the time being. So let's not forget that. Thank you.
Very briefly, I would say that we have to remember that Russia is imminent and direct threat. It should be important for us, and like I mentioned before, it should be also a strong response to defend our territories and our countries.
I think we have to say the truth to the people that Russia itself sees it in war with us, and that at least we already have a hybrid war, and because of this we have to prepare and be able to defend our countries.
I think generally we should move from reacting and repairing, if we again come to the critical infrastructure, to preventing and deterring, and really in a very concise manner.
We need to work faster and invent new ways of attacking problems. We need to attack bureaucracy that stands in the way of building capabilities. And we need to do all of this very hastily to get ahead of the pendulum.
Thank you so much to everybody on the panel. Thank you to our audience. To those of you whose questions we did not get to, I apologize. Hopefully we can continue the conversation in the reception room. But for now, please join me in giving a warm round of applause for the panelists today.